On the papers this morning, you're going to get that from The Guardian, the opposition flays Tinubu's focus on re-election. And on the Punch, we have a headline that says, Head of Service admits mistakes as reps uncover illegal approval. From The Nation, we have panel chair, how fake agency got allocation in budget of 2026. And on Vanguard, you're going to get, we failed due diligence on recruitment waiver. Yes, these are some of the major headlines that you'll be getting from us this morning on the Daily Brief with Marvelous Akbe. And it's Thursday. Yes, a beautiful Thursday morning, the 30th day in the month of July 2026, and it's a cold morning here in Asaba, around Nebisi Road. I don't know what it feels like around you, but this morning it's quite cold. Okay, so let's get straight into the papers, and we'll be starting with The Guardian. On The Guardian, we have opposition flays Tinubu's focus on re-election, loses confidence in INEC. Opposition flays Tinubu's focus on re-election, loses confidence in INEC. You can find that on page 6 of The Guardian newspaper. And also we have Atiku accuses Tinubu of fiscal recklessness, faults 12.62 trillion naira borrowing. Atiku accuses Tinubu of fiscal recklessness, faults 2.6 trillion naira borrowing. You can find that on page 3 of the Vanguard, the Guardian newspaper. And also we have Brent crude nears $90 per barrel as diesel depot prices jump to 1,670 naira. Brent crude nears $90 per barrel as diesel depot prices jump to 1,670 naira per liter. Just yesterday on my way back home, and I could hear the transporters complain bitterly about the fluctuating price of petrol in Nigeria. And this morning we have a report that it's presently at about 1,670 naira per liter. How Nigeria secured $30 billion Paris Club debt relief. That's by Okonjo Iweala. How Nigeria secured $30 billion Paris Club debt relief by Okonjo Iweala. That's on the news page 3 of The Guardian. Also on The Guardian, we have xenophobia. Lesotho woos Nigerians as federal government. South Africa resumed talks. Lesotho woos Nigeria as South Africa federal government resumes talk. That's on the news page 4 of The Guardian newspaper. US to stop visa processing at Abuja embassy and 24 other African missions. US to stop visa processing at Abuja embassy and 24 other African missions. And that's on the news page 4. Osun Amupita meets stakeholders amid tension. That's coming from Osun State. And then we have high interest rates unsettling Nigeria. Hit 20-year high, says Oxford Economics. High interest rates unsettling Nigeria. Hit 20-year high, says Oxford Economics. PFIPC scandal. More concerns as head of service admits lapses in vetting process. PFIPC scandal. More concerns as head of service admits lapses in vetting process. And that's on the news page 6 of The Guardian newspaper. Also on The Guardian, we have northern senators back Tinubu's military expansion after Benue Kaduna massacres. Northern senators back Tinubu's military expansion after Benue Kaduna massacres. All right, moving on now to The Nation newspaper. On The Nation, we have panel chair, how fake agency got allocation in budget of 2026. Panel chair, how fake agency got allocation in budget 2026. And then we have underneath that, House committee ends public sessions without Adeyemi's testimony. House committee ends public sessions without Adeyemi's testimony. All right, still on the nation, we have Sultan backs massive clampdown on terrorist hideout. Sultan backs massive clampdown on terrorist hideout, and that's on the news page 28 of the nation. Owerri, DSS arraigns 5 Ansaru terrorists. DSS arraigns 5 Ansaru terrorists, and that's on the news page 28 of the nation. Army appoints GOCs for 4 new divisions. Army appoints GOCs for 4 new divisions. And then we have governorship feud festers as Oyo APC J6 insists on consensus. Governorship feud festers as Oyo APC J6 insists on consensus, and that's on page 5 of the Nation newspaper. Still on, we have Dangote refinery critical to Nigeria's $1 trillion economy vision, says federal government. Dangote refinery critical to Nigeria's $1 trillion economy vision, says federal government. And then also on the Nation newspaper, we have Nigeria's first digital securities market to begin September. Nigeria's first digital security market to begin September. And then we have Nigeria smashes world record, and that's on page 31 of the Nation. All right, moving on now to the Punch. We have fake agency scandal. Head of service admits mistakes as reps uncover irregular approvals. Fake agency scandal. Head of service admits mistakes as reps uncover irregular approvals. As reps move to secure court order to produce Adeyemi from custody. And then also we have why we could not produce Adeyemi before reps committee, and that's coming from the IGP. OAGF official confesses giving State House Permanent Secretary letter to Adeyemi. OAGF official confesses giving State House Permanent Secretary letter to Adeyemi. That's on page 7, all on the fake agency scandal. And still on the Punch, we have Osun 2026. Adeleke kicks as police arrest SSG and 5 others. Osun 2026. Adeleke kicks as police arrest SGF and 5 others. You can find that on the Punch newspaper. It's right there on page 20. We have 2026 budget. Government agencies vote 400 billion naira for mosques, palaces, halls. 2026 budget. Government agencies vote 400 billion naira for mosques, palaces and halls. Experts demand zero budgeting over wasteful votes. That's on page 9 of the Punch newspaper. Trump immigration crackdown. US arrest visa overstayers at airports. Trump immigration crackdown. US arrest visa overstayers at airports. And that's on page 8 of the Punch newspaper. How Obasanjo's team won $30 billion debt relief for Nigeria. That's coming from Okonjo-Iweala. How Obasanjo's team won $30 billion debt relief for Nigeria. Okonjo-Iweala says it's on page 24. We have COAS names GOCs for 4 new army divisions. That's the chief of army staff names GOCs for 4 new army divisions, and that's on page 20. Also, we have DSS arraigns 5 Ansaru suspects over Oyo school abduction. DSS arraigns 5 Ansaru suspects over Oyo school abduction. Hoodlums kill Lagos dispatch rider for resisting extortion. Hoodlums kill Lagos dispatch rider for resisting extortion, and you can find that story on pages 4 and 6. Okay, pages 4 and 5 of the Punch. TED Fund bars varsities with abandoned projects from 2027 funding. The Tertiary Education Fund, TED Fund, has barred varsities with abandoned projects from 2027 funding. All right, let's move on now to the Vanguard newspaper. On the Vanguard, we have PFIPC. We failed due diligence on recruitment waiver. That's coming from the HCSF. Says in almost 100 years of federal civil service, situation as this has never happened. And Accountant General's office admits lapses, blames individual officer for letter diversion. Why we failed to produce Adeyemi. That's coming from the IGP. And all that is from the PFIPC scandal. And away from that headline, we have Nigerians should feel dividends of reforms. Nigerians should feel dividends of reforms. That's coming from Okonjo Iweala, and it's on page 20 of the Vanguard. Says federal government must add value to critical minerals before export. Federal government must add value to critical minerals before export, and Africa must move beyond tech consumption to eliminate barriers. That's coming from Cardoso. They are all on page 20 of the Vanguard. Also, we have Osun governorship poll. Police nab SSG and 5 others over alleged vote buying. Osun governorship poll. Police nab SSG and 5 others over alleged vote buying. That's on page 13 of the Vanguard. Mob killing. We beat Unijust students to recover missing phone. That's coming from suspects. Mob killing. We beat Unijust students to recover missing phone. Coming from suspects, and it's on page 7 of the Vanguard newspaper. Every day in Nigeria, we talk about how bad jungle justice can become. Sometimes it feels like it's all falling on deaf ears because we just keep getting reports like this. So the reports had come out earlier that a mob had killed a Unijust student because he was allegedly accused of stealing a phone. All right, TED Fund cracks down on abandoned projects. TED Fund cracks down on abandoned project, and that's on page 32. It says bars defaulting institutions from 2027 funding. Okay, we have Dangote refinery critical to Nigeria's $1 trillion economy. That's coming from the federal government. And we have infrastructure, weakest delivery in Rivers, Abuja template for leaders. That's coming from Okotebo, and it's on page 15. US to end visa services in Abuja and 24 other African posts by August 1. You can find that on page 8 of the Vanguard. And we have COAS names GOCs for newly established army divisions. That you can find on page 9, and all of those stories are on the Vanguard newspaper. Alright, so this morning, the Vanguard led with the headline saying opposition questions Tinubu's political focus. So we had a criticism that has followed President Bola Tinubu's alleged attention that he's paying to political calculations ahead of 2027 than to immediate governance. So this criticism comes amid continuing concerns over inflation, unemployment, insecurity, and the high cost of living. So naturally, every government begins to think about future elections, but many Nigerians expect governance to remain the primary priority. It has to remain the primary focus. And the opposition also raises concerns about public confidence in the electoral body INEC. So whether those concerns are justified or not, the trust in electoral institutions remains essential, because democracy depends not only on free elections but also on public confidence in the electoral process. So as preparations gradually begin for future elections, we hope that INEC is able to continue to demonstrate transparency and then independence and fairness to maintain public trust. It's one thing for an election to be conducted. It's another thing for more than half of the nation to not believe in the results announced by the electoral body. So they have to do a whole lot in building confidence among Nigerians. And then we also had the PFIPC scandal dominating the headlines on almost every newspaper today. And the Punch reports that the head of service admitted administrative mistakes, and Vanguard says due diligence failed. The Nation also talked about how the agency allegedly found its way into the national budget. So many Nigerians have been asking several questions that include: how can an agency that allegedly lacked proper legal backing receive budgetary allocations? Where approval processes ignored? Who should be held accountable? These have been the questions on the minds of many Nigerians. Well, the investigations are still on, so keep our fingers crossed, and hopefully we see what comes out of this. And then we talked about Dangote refinery and how it affects Nigeria's economy. That's from the Nation newspaper. Yes, the Nation newspaper highlighted the federal government's position that Dangote refinery is critical to Nigeria's ambition of building a $1 trillion economy. So the refinery, to a great extent, has already reduced dependence on imported petroleum products. So if it continues operating efficiently and local crude supply remains stable, Nigeria could reduce foreign exchange pressure and create more jobs and also strengthen the manufacturing sector. Okay, so there's also been security and terrorism concerns that made the papers this morning. The arraignment of 5 suspected Ansaru members. And then also we talked about Brent crude oil nearing $90 per barrel, while diesel prices continue to rise. And then it's been an interesting discussion. So thinking of a way to find the right balance between controlling inflation and encouraging economic growth remains one of the biggest challenges for authorities right now. Everyday Nigerians are crying hardship, high cost of living. What exactly could be done about this? Anything that could be done about this has to be done fast. And then it's not just, like I always say, mere campaign promises. Everybody that's vying for an office will tell us, they will promise us better security, they're going to promise us a better economy, but then as soon as they get into power, I don't know if we actually do get that. Well, that brings us to the end of today's newspaper review. Thank you for spending your morning with us on the Daily Brief today. I am Marvelous Akme. Keep listening to Big Heart 92.1 FM Asaba, and you can join me tomorrow for the Friday edition of the Daily Brief. But it's bye for now, and I'll be leaving you with some great music.
Hot 92.1 FM.
Here it is.
What music makes you happy?